Good evening. I would like to jump right into an interesting story of our marine monitoring data. And so what we see in Puget Sound is a continued increase in nitrate over time. That affects the nutrient balance of the system, and at the same time we see large Noctiluca blooms occurring in Puget Sound. So the question that we have is there something fundamentally going on in the lower pelagic food web of the Puget Sound system? We've been measuring nitrogen over time throughout our entire station network. Let me summarize the data down here in a graphic that represents annual Puget Sound-wide concentrations of nitrogen, and you see that nitrogen has been progressively increasing in the system. Nitrate is an important growth limiting factor and gives rise to large phytoplankton blooms. And you see a bloom here at the surface. At the same time, however, we see a shift in the silicate to nitrogen ratio in the Puget Sound-wide system. And why is that important? Well, silicate is very important for diatoms, and diatoms are considered sort of the main primary producers in Puget Sound. That silicate skeleton also makes them heavier, so they're very sort of important in export of organic material. A recent study at UW has shown that when you change the silicate concentration, you change the ballasting of cells and the sinking rate of the cells. So when we reduce that rate, it can slow down the overall sinking rate and export of organic material to depth. At the same time, nitrate, as I just showed you, is increasing. So we create a scenario for non-silicified cells to come in high numbers. And you see sort of flagellate blooms that occur in large concentrations on a large scale in Puget Sound here on the right side. So that is at the surface, but below the surface something very strange is happening. We see a decline in chlorophyll over the last 14 years. So what is going on in the system? Well, it could be that micrograzers exert a grazing pressure on diatoms, and micrograzers can clear out pretty much the entire water column once a day and strip it of its diatom content. So could this be going on potentially in Puget Sound? To show you that this might be a real scenario, I want to show you pictures from large Noctiluca blooms from this year here in Central Sound. This is a sailboat for scale. So what is so special about Noctiluca? Noctiluca pretty much eats everything it can get. It eats fecal pellets, fish eggs, nauplii, and it loves diatoms. And as it does so, it basically remineralizes organic material in the surface layer and retains nutrients and organic material in the surface layer. So just to show you how large of an impact Noctiluca can have in Puget Sound, I present a time series of chlorophyll taken with the Victoria Clipper between Seattle and Victoria. And you see these sort of gaps down here. And this is basically when we had large blooms of Noctiluca. And within a few days, they cleared out the entire Central Sound of its phytoplankton content. Noctiluca has also been implemented in fish kills in other environments. So the question is, could maybe a shift in the lower food web explain this unexplained decline in fish populations, as we can see here on a figure released by the Puget Sound Partnership for herring? At the same time, because we reduce the export of organic material, could maybe a 45% decline in the abundance of benthic species also be explained by the same mechanism? And these are data from the sediment monitoring team at Ecology. They found a significant decline in most areas in Puget Sound that could not be linked to toxic chemicals. So maybe there's a connection. So what I'd like to do now is sort of summarize my findings here in this graphic. We have a diatom-based food chain, very productive, short, effective, supporting large quantities of fish and copepods. Diatoms are heavy, so as they basically sink to the bottom, they supply the benthos with a lot of food. However, if you introduce more and more nitrogen due to human activity, you change the silicate to nitrate or nitrogen ratio and give non-silicified species such as flagellate a competitive edge. And so you can have a flagellate-dominated food web, here illustrated right under the surface. You also bring in Noctiluca, Noctiluca is a heterotrophic organism that likes to eat basically the fecal pellets from higher trophic levels. It feeds on diatoms and sort of weakens that chain, and itself it's of poor food quality, so it's rather a sink than a link to higher trophic levels. And basically we might end up with a food chain that is slightly longer and we lose more energy to higher trophic levels. And at the same time we feed the benthos with less organic material. So we produced this graphic and formulated a hypothesis in the hope that this will stimulate a healthy scientific discussion and maybe trigger more detailed studies to investigate whether we are witnessing a change from a diatom-based food web to more and more a sort of flagellate-dominated food web because of human pressures. And with that, I would like to thank you.